With Azran Legacy, it was either go big or go home. As the purported final Layton game, it clearly had a lot to deal with, both as the prequel trilogy capper and the series finale. Evidently, Level 5 decided to go big, giving us an intentionally grandiose and global voyage, closing out the Layton saga in ways never seen before. Emmy makes the idea clear in the game's opening moments.
It was to be the beginning of an epic journey, one that would take us all around the world. And it was the last adventure that I would share with Professor Layton.
A fairly bold claim to stake out, no doubt. One would expect, if the Professor Layton series decided to go big before the curtains were drawn, the reaction to the game would follow suit. In actuality, the reaction was and has been anything but. A quick YouTube or Google search reveals an absolute wasteland of discussion. You only have to scroll a few videos down to find content that was published over a year ago, and those tend to be playthroughs. Discussions about the game itself? Yeah, absolutely not. And while this kind of desolation is hardly unheard of as far as Layton games go, especially as far as the prequels go, one would expect more from what should be a momentous occasion for the series. Indeed, it seems even Level 5 is cognizant about the lack of hubbub around the game. In the series art book, The World of Professor Layton, several pages are dedicated to displaying the results of a survey given out to fans of the games. On the question about what people's favorite games are, Azran Legacy placed dead last by a fairly significant margin. Luckily, the book is quick to put these numbers into context. Azran Legacy placed 6th, but it should be noted that a lot of participants mentioned that they had not yet had the opportunity to purchase and play it at the time of the survey. While there's certainly truth to this defense, it's also easy to imagine running a poll like this today and ending up with very similar results. To my mind, sentiment hasn't really changed that much. All of which is to say, the reaction around Azran Legacy was less hostile than it was indifferent. The game came and went, a resounding meh. Perhaps this was the result of franchise fatigue, the toll of an annually released series finally coming to collect its payment, not necessarily in quality, but in interest. Or perhaps it is a matter of quality. Maybe Azran Legacy just isn't that interesting of a game. Well, as is probably unsurprising to hear, I think Azran Legacy is a pretty neat conclusion to the Layton saga. And while its focus is a great deal more scattershot than prior Layton titles, its eclectic interests, like the best of them, add up to an intriguing whole worth exploring. We ought to begin with Azran Legacy's biggest strength, its looks. It's apparent right from the start. Even though Azran Legacy uses the same character models as Miracle Mask, they've been smoothed out considerably. Gone are the thick outlines that protruded from each of the models, and the animations for each character play with way less frequency, making the models feel less stiff and awkward. The result is a game that looks sleeker and more polished than ever before, a good third step into the three-dimensional world. But Azran Legacy's biggest visual improvements are by far the environments and locales our characters visit. There's a temptation to read into the game's emphasis on epic journeys all around the globe as a clear-cut example of style over substance, that the final entry in the series should be dictated by bombast and action rather than the smaller personal moments that make Layton games so moving seems disappointingly expected. I find it becomes increasingly hard to maintain this position, however, once you actually see the game in motion. Azran Legacy's style is nothing short of immaculate, each and every screen intricately designed and bursting with impressive detail. It's a very common occurrence to move the magnifying glass across an area, only to discover towering structures and natural landscapes that were previously hidden from view. Screens are also vastly more responsive than before, with little interactable objects and knickknacks everywhere you poke. The game also features several simple overworld puzzles, like lighting up protrusions on the wall or pushing over boulders to stop a waterfall, to name a few instances. Other times these additions are truly inane, like why don't we open and shut every single one of Layton's drawers in his office? Or if you open the sewer drain, then tap on the can, you can kick the can into some boxes that knock a basketball right into the drain, all for a handy hint coin. Or you could make some scrambled eggs via a bizarre Rube Goldberg device set up inside a windmill. A running gag throughout the game sees the party gobble up plates of food every time one appears on screen, iteratively disappearing each time you tap on it. It would take far too long to list all of the little oddities and interactions across each area, but what's especially interesting is that most of them are completely non-instrumental. They don't give hint coins or collection items or puzzles, they simply exist to add a texture to the world around you. Even the puzzles seem to get in on the fun. One late-game puzzle has you push 10 buttons to open a security door. As you get close to a solution, a gun emerges from the bird adorning the top of the door, making it clear that Picarats won't be the only thing Layton's losing if he fails the puzzle. It is in this way that Azran Legacy really embodies the globe-trotting adventure it bills itself as. In making the world feel as alive as it does, the game places the investigative aspect as a more central focus of the experience. When we eventually get free reign over our experience in the 4th chapter, part of the appeal isn't just the unparalleled sense of choice, but simply because I want to see what colorful locations the game will throw out next. Azran Legacy effectively pairs its expansive narrative with an internal motivation to explore. Which isn't to say the game doesn't also generate an external motivation to explore. One of the brand new features is Street Pass functionality, wherein you can create challenges to find specific objects from across the game for other players to find, in effect designing a sort of scavenger hunt for anyone you pass by. Completing these challenges rewards you with points which can be redeemed for collectibles and other items. In complete honesty though, the chances of running into someone else playing Azran Legacy at any point in time was already astronomically low, so Street Pass's end represents only a token death of the feature at best. Still, the in-game challenges offered provide a way to maintain that incentive structure independent of other people playing. It's yet another way in which Azran Legacy encourages engagement with the world it presents. In my Miracle Mask video, I considered whether the series was attempting to draw in a more experienced gamer audience, or at least cultivate such a demographic within its already pre-built fanbase, by including more gamified elements, like the roguelike 6th chapter. At first, Azran Legacy seems to follow such a trend. Instead of horse racing, the first chapter of Azran Legacy has us gunning down drones in a high-speed airship chase, in something vaguely reminiscent of Kid Icarus Uprising's flight sections. The entirety of Chapter 4 fits the bill as well, with the ability to travel to each of the Azran Egg locations in any order, emphasizing player experience over the linear narrative of the game, a first for the series. Yet, in hindsight, Azran Legacy reads quite differently. Instead of appealing to a more hardcore, that is, console audience, the decision to use half the game to present the player with bite-sized pick-up-and-play stories feels like a proving ground for Layton's transition into the mobile sphere. This seems to bear out. The Layton series' actual first mobile title, Layton Brothers, had come out only a year prior, and Azran Legacy's 4th chapter closely resembles the case structure Layton's mystery journey would utilize several years later. Even though it was billed as Layton's final adventure, Azran Legacy spends a surprising amount of time testing the waters for Layton's future. Perhaps more cynically, Azran Legacy could be viewed as the series madly scrambling for a new direction. It's no secret that the 3DS Layton titles would not perform as well as their DS counterparts, a fact echoed by the world of Professor Layton's earlier disclaimer. Additionally, Level 5 has always had a rather notorious reputation for slowness in releasing their games to the West, sometimes taking upwards of 2 years after their initial release in Japan. While Azran Legacy only took 1 year, it is the first game in the series to not really be localized for North America. Lonnie Manila voices Luke, but other than that, the text is all written in British English. Later, Layton vs. Ace Attorney wouldn't even bother to do that much. There was the distinct sense that as time marched on, localizing the games became less and less of a priority for the series. Disappointingly, around 2019, Level 5 shuttered nearly all operations in North America, alongside their ambitions to bring their games to the West, leaving most high and dry in regards to the future of the company and their favorite franchises, a perception which has only recently begun to reverse. Coupling all these facts together, it's hard not to view Azran Legacy as the beginning of the end, a mighty power slowly but surely losing their grasp on the vast worldwide market they once played in. This anxiety seeps quite clearly into Azran Legacy. Azran Legacy very frequently has the player venture through ancient, dilapidated ruins. The Azran have a vaguely Roman parallel about them, their widespread domination of the land, the columnar temples constructed at the height of their civilization, the tunics the golems, winged servants, wear while they carry out their tasks, the extensive use of slave labor. Azran Legacy fashions the growth of the Layton series as its own sort of Roman Empire. Minus the slavery part, I would hope. But it also imagines the downfall of said empire, not via some dramatic, explosive conflict, but through a slow and corrosive decay. Through Aurora, we learn how the Azran terraformed and planted the seeds of the world the characters now inhabit. Yet time has eroded this knowledge, erased their contribution to history, and the people of today remain none the wiser. The puzzle at the heart of these ruins is always the same. How could such a mighty civilization fall to ruin? For its own sake, Azran Legacy desperately needs to find the answer. If Miracle Mask manipulated the typical Layton formula for its own ends, Azran Legacy throws out the template completely. This goes beyond the mid-game quest for the eggs. Desmond Sycamore is a perfect example. Sycamore is often on the receiving end of a familiar criticism, that his secret identity as Descalais is extremely obvious. This criticism is rooted in the traditional understanding of the Layton formula, that Layton stories are largely built off the back of shocking plot twists, and that a predictable plot twist is a failing on the part of the game to engage with what the Layton series is supposed to be. Miracle Mask received the same critique regarding the Masked Gentleman, but I'm going to make a similar argument now as I did then. Sycamore's identity is not supposed to be a secret. Raymond welcomes Layton and company at the beginning of the game, and we already know going in that Raymond is Descalais' servant. Sycamore and Descalais sound extremely similar to one another, and we learn that Sycamore has a grudge against Targent, something that was also established in Miracle Mask. The game doesn't even try to conceal these facts. Much like in Miracle Mask, the game is clearly cognizant that this really isn't much of a mystery at all. There is, however, a key difference. While our knowing the Masked Gentleman's identity was a core element of understanding Miracle Mask's story, our knowing Sycamore's identity is merely an incidental element of Azran Legacy. The story doesn't really turn on this fact in the same way that it did in Miracle Mask. So to what end is it important for us to understand that Sycamore is Descalais from the beginning? It's never really used for any sense of dramatic irony, never a time until right before the reveal that we're ever concerned Sycamore will backstab the group. The question itself might be the actual problem. Knowing that Sycamore is secretly Descalais is, in actuality, quite unimportant, because it obfuscates rather than clarifies. Unlike Doland in Last Spectre and Angela in Miracle Mask, Sycamore is not a fake identity. It is just who Descalais is normally. It's just a fact of the matter. So to understand all of Sycamore's actions as a function of Descalais is to misunderstand the character. Sycamore's actions over the course of Azran Legacy are not to be understood as trickery, but instead as genuine, much as he would like to claim otherwise. It is an inversion of the familiar plot twist. This time, Descalais is the fake identity, and Layton doesn't suspect Sycamore because there's simply nothing to see through, no mistakes to be made or details to get wrong. The mask has already been unveiled. Sycamore isn't Descalais, he's just himself. Actually, Herschel Layton himself is another character which makes Azran Legacy feel so different. Azran Legacy is arguably the only time in the series where Layton is consistently blindsided by the late game events, whether that be Descalais, the Emmy betrayal, or the Bronev reveal. Unlike his usual expositional self, Layton seems a step behind the entire time. Accordingly, Azran Legacy is really the only game which lacks an iconic pointing scene. It is instead shoved into the third chapter in a reveal that is also obvious, because again, we already know Bloom is a Targent mole from Miracle Mask. Azran Legacy clearly has a very different relation to how it goes about handling its story. Which brings us to perhaps the game's most controversial point, the Azran themselves. Layton games have always attempted to explain seemingly fantastical feats in more or less realistic terms. Whether those realistic terms added up to a plausible whole is a different story, but at the very least there was not supposed to be something akin to magic in the Layton universe. Azran Legacy seems to break this foundational element. There is no trickery involved with this ancient civilization whatsoever. When we see Azran tech pulling weapons from people's hands, or terraforming the land, or building golems, it is exactly what it purports to be. No hallucinogenic gas, or elaborate set constructions, or sleights of hand. The Azran are simply that technologically advanced. In this way, Azran Legacy raises the stakes to astronomical proportions, the finale of the game threatening the very existence of the world, while also making the Layton universe feel more fantastical than it's ever been. It shouldn't be surprising when I say I don't care much for this criticism. On the one hand, I understand the hesitation about raising the stakes like this in a Layton game. I wouldn't exactly want every new Layton game threatening the extinction of the world either. On the other hand, I think we can make some allowances for the final Layton game. If there was any game that should be doing world-ending stakes, it's probably this one. More importantly though, this critique of the Azran is really just another example of the undue criticism levied against the prequel trilogy. Notice it takes the same structure as the Masked Gentleman and Descalate critique I just discussed. It accurately identifies a difference between the way Layton games normally go and the way things are going now, but fails to find an explanation for it. There very rarely seems to be an acknowledgement that these differences are purposeful, that they mean something to the overall narrative at hand. For example, while it is true that Lucia is a more fantastical creature than something the original trilogy would have devised, when you consider how well she fits within the fairy tale aesthetic of Miss Tallery and within the themes of the game, it's hard to understand why Lucia's existence warrants criticism in and of itself. These criticisms would have you believe that the prequel trilogy went astray not on the merit of those choices, but because those choices fundamentally disregard the core appeals of the series. If anything though, I would argue the opposite. That the ways in which the prequel trilogy does things differently than the original trilogy helps distill precisely what the core appeal of the Layton series actually is. To really consider this, we have to ask ourselves what the purpose of Layton's big plot twists even are. They're not just there as a fun surprise, they're there to facilitate the character drama. The nature of towns like Saint Mystere and Full Sense suggests something about the respective characters living in those locations. It suggests something about the respective themes of their games too, usually underscoring the central problem or argument the game is trying to make. Usually, the plot twist coincides with an escalation in stakes. They are the diagnosis of the problem, not the solution. That is, the strength of any Layton twist depends on its relevance to the characters and themes of the story, and not so much the actual plot mechanics of the twist itself. The fact that future London is a complete logistical nightmare bordering on the impossible is not a compelling criticism of Unwound Future, because it ignores the ways in which future London being exactly what it is imparts meaning to the game. If future London actually existed in the future, it would make the game worse. Speaking of the future, look no further than the future of the Layton series to see a critical misunderstanding of this distinction. As I'll attempt to argue when I get there, Layton's Mystery Journey is a decidedly reactionary game, in that it marketed itself as turning away from grandiose stakes, a back-to-basics approach with smaller and more everyday stories.
Original Layton started off with a lot of simple puzzles and like a day-to-day sort of mystery, and eventually evolved into like saving the world, sort of overblown, like sort of going past what Layton really is. So with this new title, we're going back to basics. What is Layton? What is the gameplay? It's a lot of daily focused puzzle solving and smaller mysteries. So we're taking it back to its core, but we've made some adjustments.
Mystery Journey rather ironically recasts its immediate progenitor as a radical step too far. In reality, Mystery Journey most closely resembles Azran Legacy in practice, but it forgets the most important part. So consumed is it by the mechanics of its wacky plotlines, it forgets to do the character work that endeared everyone to the series in the first place. Which is all to say that if we're going to criticize the use of the Azran, we should look at how Azran Legacy utilizes the Azran. My argument is, after all, contingent on the Azran having some kind of thematic relevance to the story as is, something it wouldn't have otherwise if the Azran were instead some kind of trick of the light. Spoilers, it does. The common thread that binds Azran Legacy together is its focus on tradition. Befitting its more worldly outlook, the game is obsessed with ceremonies, heirlooms, and myths, which each seem to define the various locations we visit. When we travel to Fungi, the villagers are putting on a festival to make the village chief laugh. In San Griot, to get the Azran egg, we must participate in the local harmony ring, wherein a special object called a papanyo is passed around according to a secret set of rules. The World Times articles send us to Cod to investigate rumors of a mysterious beast called Coddy. Hoogland has us witness a ritual wedding moments after landing, while we find Mosinia in the aftermath of a large festival. Torito, okay, I'm actually not sure what's going on with this one. Can someone explain how Old Red got the Azran egg from Ruby, an elderly woman, when Ruby was a little girl? Is Old Red like an 80-year-old wolf? Good for him, I suppose. Either way, Azran Legacy seems particularly captivated on what it means to maintain a tradition. How can we update and adapt the practices of yesterday to live in the world of tomorrow? Sometimes all it requires is a reappraisal. Bud is happy to give up the egg after our participation in the Harmony Ring because the tradition lives beyond any one particular object. Other times, it means questioning why that tradition even existed in the first place. The sacrificial weddings to the Dragon Lord became an expected, tolerated way of life in Hoogland. But as it turns out, the extreme winds in the Valley of Hoogland are caused not by an angry god, but a malfunctioning Azran device that wore out over the millennia, rendering the villagers' sacrifices as nothing more than meaningless gestures. And without any reason to continue, the villagers abandoned the practice immediately. The townspeople of Torito live in constant fear of Old Red's attacks, but merely misinterpret the meaning of his advances. Just as with the malfunctioning Azran device, the egg strangulating Old Red's neck represents how once meaningful traditions can become warped and mangled with use. Left unchecked, tradition becomes not just an albatross, but an obsession. And this perverting factor is where Azran Legacy spends most of its time exploring. In the game's best chapter, Chapter 5, we visit the Nest, Targent's home base, an obscured city of smoke and railways. At one point, Raymond expresses the heart of the issue. It's possible that a good man imbued with a strong sense of purpose may, though his cause be true, be pushed to reckless ends. Following his vision to the exclusion of all else, he sees only his goal, not what it costs. It is a form of madness. Now, if such a visionary were to head a large and powerful organization, the very nature of the organization would become warped. Enter Targent, one such warped organization, bent on gaining the secrets of the Azran at whatever the cost. In terms of the Layton series, Targent is a fairly unique entity. With evil layers atop cloudy skyscrapers and an army of lackeys, Targent acts more like a league of supervillains. They're most comparable to the family from Unwound Future, but as Descalais suggests, more closely resemble a cult than they do thugs for hire. Bronev, their leader, stands as the central personality of Targent, whom many of its members swear loyalty to and strive to please. When Macintosh, one of Targent's lead scientists, tries to escape, he references how Targent lured him in with the promise to study the Azran, while Bronev twists words to obtain compliance. Targent, of course, attempts to kill Macintosh for defecting. It's clear the game wants us to think of Bronev's cult as the culmination of the madness that Raymond suggests. When Bronev explains his actions at the end of the game, he claims he
cared nothing for money or fame. I was just a scholar of archaeology.
Bronev was driven, ostensibly, by a desire for the betterment of humankind. But Azran Legacy is doing something else interesting with Bronev. Aurora explains that the downfall of the Azran began when they developed a sentient race to do their work for them. The Azran became a civilization built off the back of slave labor. Sycamore levies a similar criticism towards Targent. What makes you think the researchers have a choice? Once upon a time, they could have been ordinary people, leading happy, uneventful lives. But when Bronev threatened their families, it was either join Targent or, well, I'm sure you can imagine. Sycamore grounds Targent as an organization built off of coercion and force. In this way, Azran Legacy suggests a connection between the Azran and Bronev, that in his quest to unlock the secrets of the Azran, he ended up creating a mini Azran civilization of his own, subject to the same downfall. Ironically, despite his own criticism of Targent, Descalais suggests he too befell a similar pattern. Consumed by an obsession to take revenge after his wife and daughter are assumedly killed by Targent, Descalais says that his connection to the identity of Sycamore died alongside them, while the broken husk John Descalais is all that remains. Fitting then that Descalais' tactics should have a particularly coercive edge to them. In Last Spectre, Descalais gets Clark Triton under his thumb by threatening to harm his wife, in exactly the same manner as Targent, for exactly the same reason. As such, the cost that arises from the madness Raymond spoke about becomes clear. The cost of obsession is coercion. Azran Legacy argues obsession is not just an act of self-destruction, it also warps the space around the obsessor, causing all of the people around it to fall in. Obsession is deeply selfish. This reveals the clever nature of the Azran's final test for humanity. Too obsessed with their own ingenuity, the Azran eventually deemed themselves unworthy of the gifts they had created. They would lay a devious puzzle for whoever came next. Aurora states that the only people who may claim the Azran legacy are those whose motives are pure, but this is a trap. Due to the nature of obsession, anyone obsessed enough to find the legacy will almost certainly be selfish in nature. And so the last step of the puzzle is for the people who discovered the legacy to kill themselves for the sake of their world. Would you be willing to be the only ones not to benefit from your own discovery? If your motives are indeed pure, then the answer should be an unequivocal yes. And for the first time, Broniv makes the right decision. Instead of letting the gravity well of his obsession claim all of humanity, he decides to put it aside for an act of selflessness. Layton suggests that Broniv has regained his humanity. Perhaps this is the hope the Azran wish to bequeath. At the end of their existence, the Azran were incapable of rising above their sins. Aurora, the messenger for the late Azran, is not a person. She is a golem, a processing unit constructed to fill her purpose of testing the future inhabitants of the world. She is a thinking, feeling being, meant only to collect the relevant data and render a verdict at the end of the trial. And once this task is completed, she is to be destroyed, her existence now superfluous. Even in designing their great legacy, the Azran could only build yet another slave. Aurora expresses, in her final moments before decompilation, her wish to be reborn as a human being, to exist amongst a people who would allow her free will. And so, through Broniv, the nature of the Azran legacy is revealed. It is not any kind of ancient technology, but the one thing the Azran, in their infinite ability, could never have achieved: redemption. There's a great scene at the very end of the game, where Broniv reveals Layton's true name to be Theodore Broniv. Layton responds,
"You're mistaken. My name is Herschel Layton. I need no other name."
I, like many others, am not a huge fan of the Broniv is Layton's father plot twist. It's an overly soapy development that the game doesn't really do justice to. I'm also not particularly bothered by it either. There's almost the feeling that the game agrees with me. At this moment, Layton rejects his newfound history as having any significant meaning. He may have been born into the Broniv family, but it has absolutely no bearing on his person or demeanor. His legacy will be his own choice. In such a way, Azran Legacy suggests that its final twist is nothing short of irrelevant. This seems a wise decision. Likewise, in Azran Legacy's rush to do everything in the kitchen sink, it often feels pressed for time. Miracle Mask signaled Leonard Bloom to be a highly competent and ominous figure, but it never really amounts to much in the grand scheme of things. Bloom is dispatched within less than a chapter's time, and he bears no significant development to the overall story. Bishop frankly ends up being a more important character. Similarly, the ending plot twists could definitely use some more time to breathe. We only spend a mere 2 puzzles with Descalé before he's shot down by a laser and professing his darkest secrets to us. It may have been better if Azran Legacy seeded one of its 5 egg locations for an additional main story chapter, to give these moments additional space to grow. As for what area they should have axed, I'll let you guys decide that for yourselves. On some level, it's easy to see why Azran Legacy didn't leave the same mark as its predecessors. There's really no scene that hits quite the emotional high or devastation as in Diabolical Box or Miracle Mask, and certainly not Unwound Future, though the Emmy farewell scene is admittedly very good. It comes at the end of a long train of Layton material, where it can be hard to keep interest up year after year. And really, no need to even play the games, when you could instead watch trailers spoiling important moments from the last 30 minutes. I mean, this is a little much, guys. Still, there's a lot to appreciate with Azran Legacy. While I wouldn't say the game hits all its marks, I do always give points for novelty. After all, if you swing big, you're bound to miss at least some of the time, and it seems a little mean-spirited to rake a game over the coals for taking a risk. It's a very rare thing for a series to be given an opportunity to close itself off with a definitive ending, to willingly choose to do so. And there's something special about seeing a series get a grip with itself in its perceived last moments. But it might be too early to call Azran Legacy a failure for level 5. Its investment is in a much longer game. Importantly, Azran Legacy takes its own advice, rather than fall to routine for routine's sake and oblige the traditions of the Layton franchise. Azran Legacy tries to avoid the fate of the Azran civilization and evolve the series before it can wither away. Things looked bleak for a good long while, but Layton's fortunes may be beginning to change. With the series on the verge of a potential second wind, time will tell whether Azran Legacy succeeded.